Good morning, everybody. Mark chapter 7. We got as far as 23 last week. Jesus talking about defilement coming from within. He was confronted by Pharisees because his disciples were eating with in their heart, in their minds, unclean hands, in that they were not ceremonially washing themselves uh, before they ate. This really didn't have anything to do with hygiene. This was simply just ceremony. And we talked about that, what that meant to them, how they washed, and that kind of thing. And Jesus then uh, calls them hypocrites. Says that Isaiah had prophesied to them that the people honored God with their lips, but that their hearts were far from Him. Um, Teaching the doctrines or the um, traditions of men as doctrine and as commandments rather than just the commandments of God. So we looked at all of that and how they broke the commandment or taught their tradition, went against some of the commandments of God. And he points out the one that tells a man to honor his father and mother, and that if he curses his father and mother, then that was a capital crime in the Old Testament. And the tradition of the elders could cause them to break the commandment of God by declaring that their money or their anything they would have used to provide for mom and dad in their old age would be something that they would uh, be a gift to God. And so the temple was going to get it, or the Pharisees were going to get the money rather than their parents, and the care that, covering the cost of the care of their parents in their old age. And Jesus said, you cause the people to sin against God. You cause them to break that commandment to honor their mother and father. Honoring our mother and father is more than just obeying when we're a kid. It's more than just being nice once in a while, or not constantly be in conflict with your parents, even as an adult. It's honoring them sometimes whether you want to or not. It's being respectful. It's not talking bad about them behind their back. It's and I understand people get brought up in certain ways. We have a lot of broken homes. It's hard to not sometimes become full of animosity towards your parents, um, especially as an adult. But Jesus, he didn't let him back down from that. And the whole point, and he wasn't really addressing the crowd as much as he was the Pharisees in their heart for what they were doing. I don't think his intent was this great big long teaching of honoring your parents. He's pointing out how the tradition of men caused them to dishonor their parents and break the commandment of God. And then he goes on to tell them that it's not what goes into a man that defiles him, but it's what comes out of the man that defiles him. It's the things in our heart that we entertain in our heart. The sin starts in the heart. It's always a heart matter. You don't just, as you're walking along, do something that is against God without thinking. You think about it. You contemplate it. You justify the action before you ever take the action. That's why Jesus would say, you've heard it said that if you do this, if you commit adultery, or you've heard it said that you shall not commit adultery, but I tell you that if you look at a woman with lust for her, you've already committed adultery with her in your heart. If you're angry with your brother, you've already committed murder in your heart. You've already contemplated the action before you ever carried it out. And sin has already taken root in you. If you're going down that route, and it doesn't matter if it's those two particular things that Jesus pointed out, and I don't think he pointed those out to say that it's only these two things. And really, in doing that, he kind of outed King David, because those are the two capital crimes that King David was guilty of. So he takes the greatest king they've ever had, the most honored king, and said, look, man, if you, without, naming him, but if you commit these things, you commit them in your heart before you ever commit them with your hands. David was already guilty before he ever took Bathsheba. He was already guilty before he ever had Uriah killed, before Uriah died. He contemplated these things. He mulled them over. He didn't just entertain the thought, man, he acted on it. And all of our temptations start in our heart. We're not tempted to sin just when it hits us in the face, and then we act on it, and now we're guilty and we fail the temptation. If you are entertaining sin, you're already failing the temptation. If you're beginning to justify and make an argument in favor of you doing something you know is against God, you're already losing the temptation. And we need to be careful that the sin starts in our heart, and that was Jesus' whole point. In fact, he goes off on he rattles off a whole list of things in verse 21 and 22. All these evils that proceed from men, that come out of our hearts. Evil thoughts, adulteries, fornications, murders, thefts, covetousness, wickedness, deceit, lewdness, and evil eye, blasphemy, pride, and foolishness. All of these evil things come from within and defile the man. It's our hearts that defile us. It's not the food that we take in. Now that was a big thing because there's a whole dietary law for the Jews, and that was meant to separate them out from the people who were around them. Because oftentimes the nations or the people that lived around Israel, their food was first offered to idols. It had to do with their worship of false gods. And he wanted them cut off from that. He didn't want them participating in that. He didn't want them buying the things that they offered to idols. He meant to separate Israel out from all the nations around them, not to cut off everybody else, and that Israel would only be the ones that he would love, the only ones that he would forgive, but that they would be an example of what it was to follow the one true God. And the restrictions that are put on us as Christians, that sometimes we see as bondage, is not that. We're restricted by God. And sometimes, listen, sometimes we're restricted personally by God. I hear people just rail on somebody else for their personal conviction and say, well, that's not, the Bible doesn't say I shouldn't do that. The Bible doesn't say I can't do this. And they automatically believe that because somebody else has a conviction to abstain from something, that they then are judging everybody around them. And all it is, at least in my opinion, is God has separated that person out in a certain aspect of life to be a witness of what it means to be strong in the Lord, even to abstain from something that is permissible. To withhold from themselves something that they might desire as an honor to the Lord, as a sacrifice to the Lord. And we look at it and we say, oh, that's just ridiculous. Why are you doing that? I have the right to do this. You don't have the right. You have the freedom to do certain things. There's a difference in that. Rights we think we deserve, and it often leads to pride. I have this right, and therefore you can't infringe on me, and you can't even infringe on me by your own conviction, by even living out your own conviction. If that's how you want to live, leave me. That's what rights do. When we have the freedom, that means with freedom comes a lot of responsibility, which means we don't participate necessarily in our freedoms if it's going to cause somebody else to fall. We'll give up our freedoms and abstain from certain things to bring honor to God because other people around us are too weak to walk in that freedom. And too often I see even some young people who have convictions given to them by God, and they are encouraged to give those convictions up by people who are supposed to be more mature Christians. And see, the Bible doesn't really say you can't do this. And in an effort to try to, and I think most of the time an honest effort, a good intention to try to give them and move them into some kind of freedom, we help them to get rid of the conviction that God has placed on their heart. And I believe when we do that, we move into sin. Listen, if a young person says, I'm not going to drink, I don't want to drink, it's wrong. It's wrong for me. And they may not even be able to express all the reasons why. But when we say to them, listen, the Bible doesn't say you can't drink, just says you can't be drunk. And you need to get over yourself, and you need to allow yourself to experience these things. You need to be okay with other people who do. That's not all right. That's a heart issue coming out of that. That's a defilement coming out of you, coming out of me. It may be true that the Bible doesn't say we can't have a drink, that wine is permissible, that even any kind of alcohol might be permissible. That may be true. And I'll be honest with you, it is true. It's okay. Jesus turned water into wine. But if somebody has that conviction on their life, who are we to say, you are judgmental? You are walking in judgment of other people. You think you're better than other people. Don't tell me I shouldn't. And maybe they've never even said you shouldn't. Maybe they've just said, I won't. I can't. Maybe they're wise enough to look around and see all the destruction. I mean, I'm just picking on one thing. There's many things. But I'm just going to pick on the one thing. They can look around and see all of the destruction. Maybe it has caused destruction in their life through somebody else. Who are you and I to say the Bible says it's okay, so you need to get over yourself when God has put it in that person to abstain? Who's the one really walking in freedom? The one who thinks they have to justify what they're doing? Or the one who's just committed to abstaining for God? And it doesn't matter what you want to pick on. I mean, I just picked on alcohol because it's an easy target. Paul would tell us we don't walk in our freedom and express our freedom all the time. We'll give those up. We'll set them aside for the sake of somebody who's less mature in the faith or younger in the faith. We don't flash our walking in our freedoms and flash them around to impress people. See what I can do? Yeah, this might cause somebody else to sin. This might cause somebody else wreckage in their life, but it's not going to cause me. Look at me. We shouldn't do that. You're supposed to think about the other people. You're supposed to think about those who are less mature in the faith. And I'm going to tell you right now, the world, those who are lost, those who are stuck in that stuff, those who are in bondage in that stuff, true bondage to sin, who aren't saved, they will look at you, and they're the ones that are going to judge you. When you decide you can walk in that freedom in front of them, when they know what it's doing to their life and they see it as wrong. We give up our freedoms. Listen, a soldier, an American soldier, still has the same freedoms you and I have, but he willingly gives those up to be ordered by somebody else to do things that he doesn't necessarily really want to do, but he's trained to do for your sake. And sometimes as Christians, we need to move into that kind of mindset and soldier on for those who are around us, those who are lost, those who are younger in the faith. And we need to back off of young people, and we need to back off of older people who have the convictions of God put on their heart. And their intention is to honor God with their life and to not be inhibited by something. Listen, that's what fasting is all about, right? To lay aside something, even that is needful at that point. To lay aside something, to deny yourself for a time so that you draw closer to the Lord in that time. Now, convictions come and go. Convictions change. But I'm telling you, it is what comes out of us. An attack on somebody's conviction can defile us. Acting on any of these things that he puts in here can defile us. It is what defiles us, and we're defiled from within, not from without. Jesus made it very clear. It's always a matter of the heart. It's always, always a matter of the heart. Right? James told us the same thing, right? Desire conceived in the mind gives birth to sin. And sin brings death. It starts inside of us and it comes out of us then. What happens is the sin has already taken place in your heart. What comes out is your actions just expose you for who you really are. Expose me for who I really am. Now Jesus had taken the crowd aside from the Pharisees. These men who were used to receiving the honor from the crowds themselves. Given respect they didn't really deserve because they really weren't any better than them. In fact, they heaped up more judgment on themselves by using the traditions of men to cause people to sin against God, or using the letter of the law instead of the heart of the law to bring people under control. And I think when they stepped up and they began to challenge Jesus, the crowd backed up. But then Jesus calls that crowd in and says, listen, this is how it goes. And I don't think he had even as much of a harsh tone as I've just had with this crowd. Always when he's with the crowds, and we'll see at the beginning of chapter 8, he has compassion on the crowds. He has compassion on the people. But he's not having any tolerance for a religious person who wants to dominate. So we get to verse 24. He says, from there he arose and went to the region of Tyre and Sidon. And he entered a house and wanted no one to know it, but he could not be hidden. For a woman whose young daughter had an unclean spirit heard about him, and she came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek, a Syrophoenician by birth, and she kept asking him to cast the demon out of her daughter. But Jesus said to her, let the children be filled first, for it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. And she answered and said to him, yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs under the table eat from the children's crumbs. Then he said to her, for this saying, go your way. The demon has gone out of your daughter. And when she had come to her house, she found the demon gone out of her daughter, or the demon gone out, and her daughter lying on the bed. Now Matthew tells this story too in Matthew chapter 15. I'm going to go ahead and read it because there's a little more detail to it. Remember, Mark likes to just give us quick snapshots of this whole thing. Matthew 15 and verse 21 is where it starts. He says, then Jesus went out from there and departed to the region of Tyre and Sidon, and behold, a woman of Canaan came from that region and cried out to him, saying, have mercy on me, O son of David. My daughter is severely demon-possessed. But he answered her not a word, and his disciples came and urged him, saying, send her away, for she cries out after us. But he answered and said, I was not sent except to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. And then she came and worshipped him, saying, Lord, help me. But he answered and said, it is not good to take the children's bread and throw it to the little dogs. And she said, yes, Lord, yet even the little dogs eat the crumbs which fall from the master's table. Then Jesus answered and said to her, O woman, great is your faith. Let it be to you as you desire. And her daughter was healed from that very hour. So we have a few more details in Matthew. Same story. Jesus has left for the first time, and I think the only time, Israel proper. At least it's the only time we know that he's actually gone outside of Israel. Now, when he went to the Gadarenes, it was a Gentile-controlled area where the demoniac had come out of the tombs and met him there, and we just looked at it a few weeks ago. After Jesus addresses him, and the demons leave the guy and go into the herd of pigs and run down the hill. It was a Gentile-controlled area, but that was still an area that was settled by Gad, one of the tribes of Israel. And then the Samaritan woman, when he goes to see her in Samaria, that's still an area of Israel, but at the time it's not a proper area of Israel. In fact, they were so against the Samaritans that some Jews wouldn't even walk through Samaria. They would go out and around and avoid it altogether. So when Jesus has left the Israel areas, the Gentile-controlled areas, he's met with a demoniac that he delivers. And this man wants to go with him. And Jesus says, no, you go back to your people. You go back to your friends, your family, and tell them what's been done for you. And the Samaritan woman, he says, I have to go here. I need to go to this area. And he meets with her, and he has that interaction with her where he tells her about her own life, and she perceives him to be a prophet. And all these people come out to him, and he begins to minister to them, much kind of to the dismay of his disciples. And now he's left the area altogether. He's up in Tyre, in the area of Tyre and Sidon. And in Matthew, we see this woman come, and she calls him the Son of David. Have mercy on me, O Lord, Son of David. Now, why would she know him to be the Son of David? The Pharisees should have known he was the Son of David, that he was the Messiah. How does this woman know? Except for that, back when David was king, there was the king of Tyre, Hiram, that loved David. He provided the timbers and he provided the materials for David's palace. And he would provide it again for Solomon. If you look in 2 Samuel, when Solomon takes the throne, Hiram sends messengers to Solomon because he loved David. David was a friend of his. They had a great relationship. And the Tyre and Sidon are in the area of Lebanon. So when you see the cedars of Lebanon were brought down for the temple, and that came from Hiram. It came from up there. Later on, after Hiram and after David and Solomon, the king and the people of Tyre would commit a great atrocity against Israel, to the point where God would prophesy that they would be flattened and no one would ever inhabit them again. And we know that Alexander the Great accomplished that. And that would just be a place where fishermen would dry their nets. And even to this day, that's all it is. Even though there's still a fresh spring, from my understanding, there's still a fresh spring that comes up out of there. There's no reason why it shouldn't be inhabited, except for that God said it wouldn't be. But evidently the teaching of the time had been passed down from generation to generation, even with wicked kings that would come against Israel. And the word of Jesus, the fame of Jesus has spread throughout the whole region. And she knows him to be the Son of David. This is the one. She knows in her heart, this is the one. The one that was prophesied about. The one that I've heard the stories of, that was to come. She cries out to him, "Oh Lord." There have been many that we've seen in Israel as we go through these stories that are willing to call him Lord right up from the beginning. And she comes, and it says she worshiped him in Matthew. She worshiped him and said, Lord, have mercy on me, O Son of David. Out of her desperation, she comes and she worships him and asks. She's been living with this daughter for who knows how long. She's a young girl, possibly in her teens, but probably more 8 to 10-year-old range, they say. Severely demon-possessed, Matthew says. This is a scary household to live in. And she comes to him and says, my daughter's possessed, and basically only you can do this. She's tried everything else that she can. She's desperate. We don't know if she has a husband. All we know about is the woman and the daughter. And this is an area and a culture that would have been polytheistic, many gods, worshiping, going to temples of other gods. Maybe mom's lifestyle had exposed her daughter to this demon worship. At least the culture around him had to expose them to being anti-God. Expose them to whatever was a part of that. And here's the thing. Many of those false gods still had the whole sexual aspect of their worship to their false gods. So we don't know everything that this girl was exposed to, but maybe mom is responsible, or maybe she at least thinks that she is. She hadn't protected her daughter. She wasn't able to protect her daughter. And this is all she knows that's going to work. She's heard of Jesus. She knows he's the Son of David. This is the one prophesied of. Somehow she knows. She's not a Jew. She's a Greek. The Syrophoenicians were a part of Phoenicia. There were two areas of Phoenicia. There was one in North Africa, and then the Syrophoenicians were under the control of Syria. They were in the Syria area. And it says she kept asking, and she kept asking, and she kept asking. He's there trying to get a break. It said here he went into a house so that he wouldn't be seen, but he couldn't be hidden. I wish that could be said of us all the time. That in our life, God is so much, that he is so active, that Jesus is so active in our life, that even though we might try to hide him, we can't. And maybe you have experienced that. I don't want anybody to know I'm a Christian for whatever reason. Maybe you fear for your safety. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe you just are tired of being ridiculed about it. Maybe you don't want it to come up at a family reunion because you know how it's received. I don't know. Maybe it's at work. You're tired of people being on you. So just today, Lord, I don't want anybody to know. I don't want anybody to talk about it. I'm tired. I don't want to talk about it. But he can't be hidden. Listen, if Jesus is active in your life, if you really, truly belong to him, it won't be able to be hidden that you're his. We worry about what if persecution really comes to our country? Listen, we have brothers and sisters all over the world who are imprisoned, who are persecuted even to death because he can't be hidden. And in those moments, they have more strength than we can imagine having because we don't live in those moments. I'm going to tell you that if that kind of persecution comes here in that moment, if you have the Holy Spirit in you, God has really changed you, you will have a supernatural strength that allows you to stand in the face of evil and represent your God. He promised it. I will set you in front of kings. I will give you the words to say. Don't worry about that. Let me change your life. Let me be active in your life. This woman wants him active in her life. Matthew says she asked over and over again, to the point where the disciples are annoyed. Lord, send her away. Doesn't it seem like they're always saying that to him? We're tired of whether it's a huge crowd, Lord, they need to go. We're tired. We're done working. We can't do anymore. Send them away. And we'll justify it by they need to go get some food before they faint. And Jesus said, you know what, man? Cinch up your belt, boys, because we're going back to work. And now this woman is just going. Every time they turn around, every time he tries to speak, she's there. Lord, she won't stop. She's relentless. And we say, why is he ignoring her? I don't think he's ignoring her. I think he's drawing her out. He can't be hidden. The crowds are gathering anyways. And she's relentless. And he's letting these people see what happens when you pursue God with all your heart, when you can't go anymore, when you're desperate and you need a change and you need a touch from God, and you pursue him and you keep pursuing him. It's not that he's not listening. He is hearing her. He's hearing you. But he's going to wait for the exact right moment when it's going to bring more glory and honor to God the Father than you can imagine. That moment when you are at your weakest, you think you can't go on anymore. Maybe she's cried out so much her voice is starting to get raspy and she's losing her voice. Maybe she's just fallen at his feet now and just weeping. But it's on display for everybody there to see. And he says, listen, it's not okay to take the bread that belonged to the children and throw it to the dogs, to the little dogs. Now, this isn't the wild dogs. The dogs in that day would run in packs, be wild, and most of them, and they would raid whatever food they could and kind of ravage places, and they were dangerous. But there would be house dogs too. And they would be puppies. And he's talking about a puppy. You don't take the bread away from the kid and throw it to the puppy. And I don't think he's being harsh. And, Lord, forgive me if my voice is ever not like his. Sometimes I'm reading these things and I'm going, all right, you need to back off because you're not really representing right now. I think just like any other time, he looks at her full of compassion and says, listen, it's not okay. And he knows the lesson's going to go out. Listen, he knows you are going to be sitting here today hearing this. I think he smiles. He says, listen, it's not okay for me to take the bread that belongs to the children and throw it to the little puppy. And he knew what her answer was going to be. She doesn't really catch him by surprise. Yes, Lord, I know. See, there's a head knowledge there that Messiah was going to come to Israel. that salvation that we are told later in the New Testament, salvation came first to the Jew and then to the Gentile. That there was an order to God's plan and it's been carried out. And even in the Old Testament, you find that there's an encouragement to Israel. You follow the Lord so that you will be a light to the Gentiles. Not so you just be cut off and we cut off the Gentiles and we have nothing to do with them ever. But to be a light to the Gentiles so they would know what it means to follow the Lord. Yes, Lord, I know that. But even the little dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Yesterday, we had a birthday party for Nick, and while we were getting ready and food was being made, Emma made a salad, and she was trying to shave up some carrots to throw into the salad, and a piece of carrot landed on the floor. Our little bitty dog ran over and grabbed the carrot. She's, Dad, he's eating a carrot. I said, yeah, he's doing his job. He's cleaning up the floor. It's what he's supposed to do. And he needs to earn his keep a little bit. I mean, you know, he's not a big dog. He's not going to scare anybody off. Chances are, you know, something came in the yard chasing you, he'd just run faster than you. But I just said, this is what he does, man. Ice cubes fall on the floor, he's on the ice cubes. Any food falls on it. We used to have a lab that would just sit when the kids were little in their high chairs. He would just sit underneath that high chair because he knew dinner was coming. And you had to watch him because every once in a while he'd try to clean up the tray rather than wait for it to get to the floor. She said, I understand. I know who you are. You are the King of Israel. You are the Messiah of Israel. You are the Son of David. I know that. But even the youngest dog, even the puppy knows to sit under the table of the kids who belong to the master to eat from his table. And if all I get is the crumbs, that's enough. And here in Mark just says, for this saying, he said to her, for this saying, go your way, the demon has gone out of her. But Matthew, who was there, remember, Mark is just recording Peter's story. Matthew, who was there, says that Jesus said, great is your faith. Your faith is amazing. Let it be as you desire. And we see in verse 30 here in Mark, and when she had come out, or when she had come to her house, she found the demon gone out and her daughter lying on the bed. Gone. 5 miles away, however far away her house was from there, when she gets home, the demon's gone. Matthew says from that very hour. So she must have been left in the care of somebody to know that what time it was that it happened, so that when she got home, she knows this is the time when Jesus said, it's done. And again, we see his great power. Listen, if you walked with the Lord for a long time, I think we take for granted some of these words that are said here, in that, you know, of course Jesus said it. I know this. I've grown up listening to the story. I know he said it. When he said it, it was done. And we forget to think about the fact that he is the God of the universe, the King of the universe. And when he said it was done, that demon heard that and had to leave. And this is an emphatic thing here. This is the wording here in the Greek is that it was complete, never to happen again. This wasn't he was booted out and going to be able to come back with 7 of his buddies if this little girl didn't get her act together. This was complete. It was sent away, never to return. Maybe you're a parent, grandparent, aunt, uncle, here or listening. And you have somebody that you've been praying for. I'm not even suggesting that they have to be possessed, but Jesus walked into that woman's world to meet her where she was at, to speak a word into her life that delivered her daughter. Maybe you know that from your own experience. Jesus entered into your world and cleared it up for you. Maybe you have somebody in mind, somebody you've been praying for a long time, and you're about ready to just give up. Lord, I don't know what else to do. I put this person in front of you for a long time. My son, my daughter, my grandson, my granddaughter, my mom and my dad. Somebody in your life that you've been putting in front of the Lord over and over again, maybe for years. And you're just going, nothing's working. And I don't think you're hearing me. He's hearing you. Don't quit. This woman wouldn't quit. Cry out to the Lord. And here's the thing. Will you worship him anyways, even if it's not answered the way you want it to be answered? See, Matthew says she worshiped him and cried out to him. Is this walk with the Lord just a religious experience? It can be. We can fall into that really easy. We just go day to day. I read my Bible 15 minutes this morning. I went to work. I did this. I punched in. I punched out. I went to lunch. I went here. You know, on Tuesday I ate at this restaurant for lunch. On Wednesday I ate at this restaurant. You know, we got it a routine, and we have to fit God into our routine, and God just becomes routine. It's not meant to be that. He's not our routine. Cry out to the Lord. And see what kind of things happen. See what he does. She wasn't there to watch her daughter convulse or have some great big thing happen in the house. She didn't watch her head spin around and levitate or anything else. There was no big dramatic theatrics that went on. There was no throwing her down on the ground and convulsing, which we've seen in some of the other things. There was no cast out the demons and they go and destroy a herd of pigs. It is none of that. It was, Lord, I need you. And Jesus said, your faith has caused this to happen. Done. It's done. And listen, when Jesus says it's done, it's done. This is to never happen again for this girl. When it's finished, it's finished. When he says it's finished, it's finished. When he said on the cross, tetelestai, it is finished, paid in full. There's no more payment to make. It's finished. In the beginning, when he said, let there be, it was exactly as he wanted it to be. No more and no less. And it'll be the same in the end. When he says, no more. There won't be some great big fight when he puts the Antichrist into the lake of fire. When the false prophet goes. I don't believe Armageddon will be all that dramatic, except for his power coming from his mouth when he says, "Done," and everybody dies. We have this Hollywood mentality of how it needs to play out and how it's going to act. And man, won't it be awesome to be able to see this happen and see that happen? I'm telling you, with a word, done. With a word, done. Do we see some things happen in the Bible that are kind of dramatic and there maybe is a process? Yeah. But it's by a design. But I see more often in the Bible, the things that are the most important are done with just a word. A word from God. Not a word from me. Not a word from anybody else. Only Him. Let's see if we can get through the rest of the chapter here. Again, verse 31, again, departing from the region of Tyre and Sidon, he came through the midst of the region of Decapolis to the Sea of Galilee. All right, so now the Decapolis is back around on the other side of the Sea of Galilee where the demoniac was. So remember, when he was there with that man, they were like, "Get out of here. We don't want any more of this. You've destroyed our economy. You've cleaned the land. We don't," I mean, they didn't see us cleaning the land, but you've made too big a fuss. We're out. You need to leave. So he comes back into the area or the region of the Decapolis. So this is like 10 cities in this region. Into the Sea of Galilee. And they brought to him one who was deaf and had an impediment in his speech, and they begged him to put his hand on him. And he took him aside from the multitude and put his fingers in his ears, and he spat and touched his tongue. Then he looked up to heaven, or then looking up to heaven, he sighed and said to him, I don't know how to say that, Ephphatha? Sounds like I have a speech impediment. That is, be open. That's more important. And immediately his ears were open, and the impediment of his tongue was loosed, and he spoke plainly. Then Jesus commanded them that they should tell no one, but the more he commanded them, the more widely they proclaimed it. And they were astonished beyond measure, saying, "He has done all things well. He makes both the deaf to hear and the mute to speak." And again, you can go to Matthew and read these same stories, and maybe there's more details. We're not going to jump back and forth anymore with that right now. No, please, do not think that what Jesus did is the process you have to go through to heal somebody of deafness and muteness. If the day comes when I can't speak, please nobody spit on my tongue. But we see him do a work. Right? They begged him. They brought him, this man, to him. And begged him, do this, please do this. Heal him. Put your hand on him. And he took him aside and put his fingers in his ears and spat and touched his tongue. So he didn't spit on his tongue, but he probably spat on his own finger and wiped it on the guy's tongue. But you notice he took him aside. This wasn't a great big public thing. The miracle itself was. But what Jesus did was not a big public thing. Now, there were many. But usually when it's a huge public thing where lots of people are being healed, he's just touching them, or he's speaking to them, or they're touching the hem of his garment. There's not a big show about this. Only a few. Peter, probably. Matthew records some of this. But only those who were closest to him saw what he did. But the effects of what he did are public. Immediately, right now, immediately his ears were open. And he could speak, and he could speak clearly. This restoration of things, of physical ailments in a person we often see with Jesus are reconstructive immediately, brand new. Like it had never been damaged. We don't know what happened to this guy, if he was born this way, and maybe he was, and maybe he wasn't completely deaf, and that's why he had a speech impediment. So you hear, you've heard deaf people or people who are mostly deaf try to speak, and it's not very clear all the time. Maybe he was tongue-tied. I don't know. We don't know all the details of why. That's not the important thing. The important thing is that he can hear fully and he can speak clearly. And then he commands them that don't tell anybody. He took him aside from the crowd. Don't tell anybody. But the more he commanded, the more they told. The more he commanded them, the more widely they proclaimed it. Is that what Jesus needs to do with us? Because when we get to the end of the Gospels, we see the Great Commissions, right? Go into the whole world and tell everybody. Preach the gospel to every creature and make disciples everywhere you go. And we're like, you know what? I'm just going to be my little shell. I'm going to be right here in my little world. I'm just going to talk to my kids until they're old enough to make their own decision. Then I'll leave them alone. And it's better for me to just go ahead and live good in front of everybody. And that'll be my witness. That'll be my testimony. Why aren't we like these people? Do we need Jesus to say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna do this great thing for you, but I want you to shut up about it. I want you to don't tell anybody. Don't tell anybody that I changed your life. Don't tell anybody that you're set free from drugs. Don't tell anybody that you're not stuck in alcohol anymore. Don't tell anybody that I restored your marriage. Don't tell anybody. Just be quiet about it, okay? I've got enough business already. I have people all over the world trying to talk to me all at once. I don't need any more. I need a break. Yeah, I mean, if he did that, would we change what we do then? I think sometimes because we don't have such a drastic life change. You walked with the Lord since you were a kid. You've done some dumb things. I did some stupid things. I did a lot of stupid things. I had my time of being a prodigal. I wasn't walking with the Lord. But I still knew he was there. And for some reason we think, you know, and really, people who have a drastic change in their life. Man, we're going to put them up on a podium. We're going to put them on a stage somewhere. We're going to have them come and speak at an intermission at concerts. Lots of lights. We're going to make a big deal out of this so we can reach lots of people. And we don't just say anymore, hey, what did God do for you today? What did you do this week? And I can remember as a kid, on Sunday nights, it was singing hymns and testimony time. What did the Lord do? What have you seen? Somebody shout out a hymn. So somebody shout out a hymn. All right, we're going to sing this hymn. We're going to sing 3 verses. And then when we're done, I'm going to give everybody a chance to speak. Somebody speak. You know what I don't ever remember? In that crowd of, I don't remember how many would come on a Sunday night. Obviously not as many as would come on a Sunday morning, but I don't ever remember not hearing something. See, that Sunday evening service was filled with people from what we would call in our country, or what we used to call it, was the greatest generation. People who lived through the Depression, as the Great Depression, as children. We talk about our depressions and recessions in the last 20 years. It's nothing compared to that. Oh, it was horrible. Oh, it was horrible 20 years ago. It was horrible 10 years ago. You know what? Kids still are playing video games. Everybody's still driving their cars. Everybody's, the unemployment was low, or high, but it wasn't like back then. Most of the men had been in World War II at least. They knew what it was like to be thankful. They knew what it was like to give thanks to the Lord. And they weren't afraid to do it. How widely are we making him known? When God does something in your life, you go to work the next day and it's all people who don't believe. But something's changed. Something's different. Something happened, and you tell them what happened. Do you tell them that the Lord did it? Are you willing to tell them that God did it? Do you run out and tell them? We've talked about this before. I've talked about this. You see thousands and thousands of prayer requests on the social media places, and they go around the world in seconds. But rarely do you see, when the prayer is answered, the follow-up. And even when you do, it's often just hidden in the comments of the original post. It's never a new original post. I saw one this morning. I'm going to close with this. You haven't asked any permission about this, but we prayed for Tracy's cousin's husband, John, who was in the bombing in Syria a year ago. And in the process of all that, he lost both of his eyes, among other things that happened. But he's one of the ones that survived the bombing in Syria. He's gone through a lot. To wake up and know that some of his men died. To have to recover from this. How about to never see his wife's face again? And I know this is a post from a couple of days ago. But when I was switching my phone over to get ready to do the Facebook Live, I saw a post pop back up again. And maybe this doesn't mean anything to anybody else, but the guy ran a 10-mile race that's sponsored by the Army to help disabled veterans. 10 miles blind. I think is it his daughter that ran with him? His sister ran with him to make sure that, because he would have to, hold somebody's arm. Ran a 10-mile race. I know what it takes to run a 10-mile race because I've run one twice. 2 years in a row, I ran the one that's in Flint, the Bobby Grimm. I know what it takes to run 10 miles. I'm not doing it now. I don't even walk 10 miles. Yes, he did. He said, this summer I did. All right, well, this summer I probably walked 10 miles. But I tell you what, on the days I walked 10 miles, it hurt. John hadn't run more than a mile. I saw him because I read through the post real quick. He hadn't run more than a mile since last January. And when he did that last January, that was amazing. Now, you train to run 10 miles. But that is not just a nice thing the guy did for disabled vets. This is something a believer did. And in his heart, he's taking care of, he's raising money for disabled vets. But his wife asked for us to pray for him because he was getting ready for the race. And his life continues to be a witness for Jesus, even after that tragedy. I'm telling you, if the Lord waits and the Lord blesses someday, if we have a men's conference, I want him to come here. Well, you don't have to wait for that. I mean, if he's listening, if they're listening, they happen to be listening, I want him to come tomorrow. The more he goes through, the more goes out. And he could have curled up in a ball after that. He could have just went home and just been happy to just be him and his wife and still alive for that. But instead, they've taken this and they keep putting it out. How amazing God is and what God is doing in his life and what God's enabling him to still do in spite of the injuries and in spite of what happened, the trauma that happened. But I'm telling you, you don't have to have such a dramatic story to proclaim Jesus everywhere you go. You will be asked every day why you do certain things that you do. Why do you do the things you do? Why don't you? Especially people who knew you before you were saved or knew you while you were a prodigal. Why? What changed you? I got asked this when I was working with the youth group after I decided to, stop being dumb and get out of the hog trough. And I went and worked with the youth group, and they said, who died and made you? I don't remember how I said it. Who died and made you their keeper, or whatever, however they put it. And I just looked at him. I'm like, what are you talking about? I was taken back by the question, because all the guy wanted me to do was to go fishing with him. I'm like, you can go fishing, or I'm going to go hang out with the youth group. And, well, yeah, you're not a believer. Probably what I should have said was Jesus. Jesus died and made me responsible for teaching these kids. He died, he changed my life, and this is what I do. Whatever we do is unto the Lord. Everything unto the Lord. Everything. You're living and breathing. You do it as unto the Lord. We can probably all look back at some point in our life and say, you know what, I probably shouldn't have survived that. That was a close call. It wasn't a close call. God protected you. We can look at horrible times in our life that we've come through, that we've survived. But it's not our own determination. It's a determination that is fueled by the Holy Spirit that lives inside of you and me. It was a determination to get through something, to be close to God. It drove us to him. Lord, I can't go anymore. I can't do anymore. Save me in this situation. I've done that. I didn't need to be saved from hell anymore. I just needed to be saved in that situation. I needed to know. I needed to hear. I needed to feel. And I knew he cared. I knew he cared. I knew he was there. I knew how I don't know. I don't even know what I do. But I knew he loved me. And I knew he wouldn't leave me there. I knew I was either coming through it or I was going home. One of the two. Either way, this situation or that situation was going to be done sooner or later. And it was going to be by his hand and not mine. And you all have those moments. Every believer can look back in their life and know that in spite of the enemy's worst, God was there. His hand was on you. His hand was on me. And we're through it because of him, not because of ourselves. And listen, it doesn't matter if a person is begging for God to move or if a crowd is begging for God to move. It's okay to fall at his feet and to worship and say, Lord, there's no strength in saying, I prayed once and I'm done and I just wait on it and I'm just going to go ahead. Life is as usual. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. I just prayed about it. It's done. God will handle it. I'm going to be strong. I'm not going to worry about it anymore. It's okay. It's preferable to be weak. To acknowledge your weakness, my weakness, and to fall at his feet and say, I can't anymore. And maybe even, I'm sorry it took me this long to get here. You have preachers out there that are saying, no, you to say, I am this and I am that. And you to stand and you're going to yell at the devil. And you're going to... Paul said, in my weakness, when I acknowledge my weakness, he shows his strength. In my weakness, he is strong. And out of that comes the determination to stand like a soldier, to press on and to work hard like a farmer. Those things that Paul used as to train like an athlete. Those things that Paul used as examples of who we are in Christ. But the bottom line with him and with everybody else is, in my weakness, he's strong. Training for an athlete exposes a weakness. Working hard as a farmer exposes a weakness because you still are dependent on the rain to come. Being a soldier exposes your weakness because you are determined to have somebody else cover your back. You have to. Training in all of those, learning in all those, exposes our weaknesses, and then we look to the Lord and we say, you got to be strong here because I'm not. I'm not strong here. And he's okay with that. He's good with that. He prefers that. He prefers your weakness, and he prefers that you know your weakness and that you admit your weakness. Because then he can work. And when everybody sees him work through your weakness, you can't say, yeah, look at how good I was. Your pride is gone. I'm weak here. I need the Lord. And if he has worked through your weakness, then you need to glorify and honor him. I can't do it. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do this without God. You hear people say all the time, when bad things happen, how can you believe in God? when these things happen. And I say, how can you go through those things without him? Because I can't. And we all stand up and have the worship team come. Today, through this week, every day, acknowledge your weakness. In whatever situation it is that's driving you, acknowledge your weakness. Whatever is overwhelming to you, acknowledge that before the Lord. Let him touch you. Let him change you. Maybe there's something you need to be set free from. Be set free. Let him. Ask him. Maybe you've been asking over and over again for a long time. Ask him some more. Let him deliver you. Let him restore you. And then honor him for it. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word. Lord, thank you for what you've done for us. Lord, for your death on the cross. For your offering salvation, things that we could never have done, never even known we needed without your influence in our life. Lord, thank you for using the men and women that you have in the past to influence us to get us even to this point. And Lord, I pray that there would be a new fire and determination in all of us to become like them, examples to another generation. And Lord, not even to another generation only, but to a community, to a family. May we be examples of what you can do in a person who's weak. And Lord, I pray that we would all be willing to glorify and honor you in whatever you do in our life. Lord, maybe there's somebody today here or listening that has been asking and begging. Lord, I don't send them away, but hear them and speak to their hearts today. In Jesus' name, amen.